If you are like one of the thousands of managers I have taught over the years, then you probably believe that things like climate change, inequality, and the many social ills that are facing us today are important, but they are someone else's problem. I have asked small companies, and they think that it's the big company's problem. Big companies think it's the government's problem. And even countries, hint, hint, think it's another country's problem. No wonder we are in the mess that we are. Isn't it fascinating that something as important as sustainability, the health of our planet and its people, is given short shrift by so many, particularly in the corporate sphere? I wanted to get some answers. So over the past 5 years, I've visited dozens of companies and spoken with hundreds of employees, traveling from Madagascar to India to the streets of London to Chile's Atacama Desert. The result is a book that just came out, which I'm going to preview for you today. I've learned that the sustainability movement is failing not because companies pursue the wrong goals, but because they do so in the wrong way. Companies have never been more conscious of the need to do business in responsible fashion. But when it comes to practicing and not just preaching sustainability, many struggle and most founder. They are bystanders in what is perhaps the biggest challenge of our times. But not all companies are waiting for someone else to take charge. A handful of companies around the world are taking ownership of sustainability and getting it right. And would you believe it? These same companies that are getting sustainability right have higher profits, stronger reputations, higher employee engagement, all the good things that every company craves for. A case in point, according to polling agency Gallup, in 2017, only 15% of employees worldwide were engaged at work. Think about how low that number is. In contrast, at Unilever, one of the companies that does get sustainability right, employee engagement is at 80%. As CEO Paul Pullman told me, when you have that level of employee engagement, you can do a lot of things wrong, but you'll still find a way to be successful. So, shouldn't every company want to do this? Based on my research, I propose a model for building sustainability ownership so that sustainability is not someone else's problem. But before getting to my model, what does ownership even mean? And why would we want to take ownership of sustainability? First off, note that ownership is an innate part of the human condition. It fulfills fundamental human needs such as efficacy, or the need to control the environment, identity, the need to express ourselves, and belonging. So it's something we can all access. Psychological ownership refers to feelings of possessiveness and connection that we develop towards people, things, companies, or even ideas like sustainability. I argue that ownership is an especially helpful concept for companies seeking to galvanize their stakeholders around sustainability. Why? Because confronted daily with evidence of climate change, human rights abuses, etc., most of us yearn to do something to help the situation. But we don't have the opportunity or encouragement. We are uncomfortably numb. But when cajoled to take ownership of sustainability, we perk up and create meaningful solutions to the problems that surround us. Everyone, from the mailroom to the boardroom, can participate. So sustainability ownership bridges the gap between our desire to find meaning in our jobs and our ability to find it. So what does my model look like? It has 3 broad phases. Incubate, where you define your domain of ownership. Launch, where you create both willingness and ability in your stakeholders to assume ownership. And entrench, where you instill practices that make acting sustainably second nature. The journey begins with understanding the higher purpose of your business. You must ask, who are we? Why do we do what we do? Francesco Storace, CEO of the large Italian electricity company Enel, surprised me by telling a story from the 1980s when he was a middle manager working for another company. He was in a team of engineers building a power plant in a remote corner of the Middle East. The company was transporting crude oil to power the plant, one truck at a time. And there was a transmission line from the plant, but with no load to feed. He was puzzled. Why were these guys building this power plant at all? Doing some digging, he discovered that the power plant was actually the cornerstone of a dubious piece of social engineering. The whole area needed to be electrified. Air-conditioned housing needed to be built so that the nomads living in the area would finally stop moving around and sit in these air-conditioned homes and watch TV. None of it made any sense to him. Years later, when he was CEO, he used this epiphany to define his company's purpose. An energy company's business could not be about foisting new habits on social groups to boost electricity consumption. It had to be about asking these groups what use they could make of electricity. It was about empowering customers, not dictating to them. It was about purpose before profit. So, job one is to define your corporate purpose and communicate it far and wide. After committing to a broader purpose, define concrete sustainability goals that can bring your purpose to life. Coming up with concrete sustainability goals results in a prioritized list of achievable targets, which makes it easier to assume ownership. To concretize the sustainability ownership domain, you must ask questions such as, where is growth likely to come from the future? What trends will affect demands for our products and supply of raw materials? What do our stakeholders want from our business? Look at hard issues like carbon emissions, water use, waste generation, and labor conditions, performing a footprinting exercise across the company's entire value chain, from procurement to disposal. Coca-Cola European Partners, one of the largest bottlers of Coca-Cola, widened its footprint analysis to include suppliers. By doing so, it found that its biggest resource issue was water, which I know is hardly surprising, but it wasn't the water used in its bottling plants. It was the water used by its sugar beet suppliers in growing sugar beet. This unexpected finding helped the company to quickly come up with new rules to reduce water usage. So defining concrete sustainability goals takes time and effort, but the feelings of ownership it fosters and the corresponding business results are well worth it. Armed with a purpose and a set of concrete goals, it's now time to launch your sustainability plan and entice your stakeholders to jump aboard the good ship sustainability. To entice stakeholders, you must understand how and why people respond to change. Sometimes you appeal to the head, like this is the smart thing to do business-wise. Other times to the heart, this is the right thing to do in such troubled times, and very often both. Use different strokes for different folks. To convince hard-nosed line managers, show them the dollar signs. But when it comes to rank-and-file employees, appeal to the heart. Best-in-class companies use a range of strategies to achieve this, from taking employees to front lines, to see firsthand the positive impact of their back-office work, to taking them to beer pubs after hours to discuss the kind of world their children will inherit. Employees and other relevant stakeholders need to get shown the light on why sustainability ownership is so crucial. It's not enough to entice or create willingness. You must create ability and enable ownership by lowering the costs and increasing the benefits of acting sustainably. Use some mixture of training, management systems, and incentives to alter that cost-benefit ratio. Set strict requirements, but give stakeholders the flexibility to solve problems. IBM asked its suppliers to meet 8 environmental targets and offered to help them where needed, but suppliers had to come up with their own solutions. Encourage stakeholders to innovate, because that fosters ownership. Every part of the organization must participate. Human resources should train people. Marketing should promote the environmental and social benefits of products. Finance departments also have vital roles in driving sustainability, especially through the dialogue they maintain with investors. Make sustainability everybody's job. One wise C-suite officer told me, if you make one exception, everyone thinks they're the exception. The final phase of my model is one where we entrench sustainability so that conducting business through the sustainability lens becomes second nature. A powerful way to do this is to demystify and provide feedback on the progress your stakeholders have made on sustainability goals. As one CEO told me, measure is treasure. Providing feedback gives stakeholders the opportunity to learn about the effectiveness of sustainability actions they undertook and make mid-course corrections if need be. What should we measure? I like to break it down into direct and indirect routes via which sustainability creates value. Direct measures include carbon emissions, water usage, waste reduction, etc., whereas the indirect refers to stakeholder reactions such as satisfaction, engagement, and loyalty. Feedback on these measures increases the likelihood that stakeholders will take ownership because people tend to like making a difference. Next, just as the experience of owning a home is enhanced by a fresh coat of paint or new furniture, the experience of owning sustainability is enlivened or kept fresh through events and practices that keep it relevant. If you don't maintain the initial excitement or belief, it becomes another flavor of the month. Such entropic tendencies can be arrested by a vibrant corporate culture that does what I call the 3 C's: celebrate, communicate, co-create. To inspire by example, it's vital to celebrate projects and initiatives that have succeeded. Companies like Marks & Spencer have Oscar-style red carpet events to reward employees who have shown excellence in some area of sustainability. Communicate about sustainability using dashboards, webcasts, browser pop-ups to constantly remind colleagues of what's in play and what's at stake. People in the form of sustainability ambassadors who remind everyone of their goal are still the best communicators. Finally, invite employees and managers to co-create initiatives with you so that they see firsthand that they have a real role to play. Such co-creation, along with celebration and communication, goes a long way in entrenching sustainability ownership. The final step in your model is one where we expand our sense of ownership, like when we don't just care about our own lawn, but our neighbor's lawn as well. See, companies cannot go it alone when it comes to solving big problems, such as deforestation, hunger, child labor. They must collaborate, even with traditional competitors. As one example, many companies came together to form the Consumer Goods Forum, agreeing to sustainably source raw materials such as palm oil, beef, soy, and timber that drive deforestation. That was a pretty special moment because you had Unilever, P&G, Nestle, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and many more heavyweights suddenly agreeing on this agenda. We need many more such initiatives to solve plastics, effluents, electronic waste, and the like. We need to put sustainability in the pre-competitive space and expand our sense of ownership for our planet and people. That's it for my model of sustainability ownership. Here's a visual of the pieces I described. You may wonder by now, what does ownership in action look like? Let's take one example. Marks & Spencer has their sustainability plan called Plan A, which has been very, very successful. And now, Plan A has gone from being a noun to being a verb, so that if you're printing excessively or taking too many napkins in the cafeteria or what have you, someone might well tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, that's not very Plan A. Now, that's what I mean by sustainability ownership in action. They all collectively care about the planet and its people. Let me end with a personal story. In January 2017, when most of the northern hemisphere was freezing, I was visiting the Atacama Desert area of Chile to see firsthand the work that the electric company Enel was doing in the area. We traveled long distances by car at high altitudes, sometimes exceeding 14,000 feet. I had to get special medical clearance to make the trip. The internet service while we drove in the cars was rather spotty, as you can imagine, and available only intermittently. These were rare moments, and beyond checking email, the other favorite thing to do was to play some music from my Spotify account. It was one such moment when my music was interrupted abruptly, and another voice came on, singing, "I love you, you love me, we're a happy family." You recognize that voice, right? It's Barney, that toddler sensation. I had heard that song 1,000 times with my son Felix when he was 2 or 3. But why and how was this happening here? Then it struck me, of course, this was the handiwork of my 13-year-old Felix. We shared one Spotify account, and he had overridden my song with his. He was trying to send me a message of love. I had been away for some time, and he was missing me. That was truly a special moment in my entire life, and I got a bit emotional. After all, when you cut to the chase, what is more important than love and being able to care for those you love? Felix is now 16 years old. As I look at him and his school friends and teenagers everywhere, I cannot help but wonder, what kind of world are we going to leave to the next generation? Sustainability progressives say we don't inherit the earth from our parents, we borrow it from our children. How true that is. But the mess my generation has created is prompting teenagers to take to the streets. My son and his friends walked out of school in 2018 to protest gun violence after the Parkland, Florida massacre on school children. More recently, in 2019, thousands of school children all across the world have walked out of their classes to join climate strikes everywhere. As much as the youth activism is inspiring and downright necessary, it leaves me ashamed. We have failed our young, perhaps the last thing any adult wants to fail at. But the good news is that the youth are taking ownership of the problem and urging us to do the same. So, no more excuses. Let's take ownership of our future. There are no guarantees as to whether our collective efforts will be enough or whether we are too little too late. The refrains I hear all the time. But inaction is precisely wrong. Giving this talk today was a small action on my part. When all of you do something about it, you'll make a big difference. Do whatever you can in your sphere of influence. Take your own shopping bag or come up with a way to suck carbon out of the air. But let's do this. Thank you.